The explosion threw Jake Martinez against the metal wall so hard his teeth rattled. Sparks flew from broken cables above his head as the lights flickered and went out. Emergency red lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie glow. The diplomatic vessel Aurora's Dawn shuddered like a dying animal. Jake pulled himself to his feet and grabbed his rifle. His ears were ringing, but he could hear the screaming. Human screams mixed with alien shrieks of pain. The Korthak Syndicate had found them. Martinez, report. Captain Coleman's voice crackled through his comm unit. Sector 7 is compromised, sir. Hull breach on Deck 3. I'm moving to... Another explosion cut him off. This one was closer. Much closer. The floor beneath Jake's feet buckled and twisted. Through the smoke he could see Korthak soldiers pouring through a hole in the ship's side. They moved like deadly shadows, their black armor making them almost invisible in the dim light. Jake raised his rifle and fired. One of the attackers spun and fell. The others turned toward him, their glowing red visors focusing on his position like the eyes of demons. Human. One of them hissed in broken English. Where is the Queen? Jake didn't answer. He rolled behind a fallen support beam and kept firing. These weren't just pirates or raiders. They were here for something specific. Someone specific. Queen Zixthara of the Veltani Empire. The peace talks. Jake remembered now. The Queen was supposed to meet with Earth's leaders in 3 days. If humans and Veltani formed an alliance, it would change everything. The Korthak wouldn't be able to push around smaller species anymore. No wonder they wanted her dead. A plasma bolt sizzled past Jake's head, burning a hole in the wall behind him. He needed to move. The ship was dying around him, and he was outnumbered 20-1. The smart thing to do was find an escape pod and get out while he still could. But the Queen was still aboard somewhere. Jake cursed under his breath. He wasn't a hero. He was just a Marine sergeant from Detroit who followed orders and tried to stay alive. But leaving someone to die didn't sit right with him. Even if that someone was an alien he'd never met. He made his way through the burning corridors, stepping over the bodies of his fellow soldiers. The Korthak had been thorough. And fast. Too fast. Someone had given them inside information about the ship's layout and defenses. The Queen's quarters were on Deck 5. Jake climbed through a maintenance shaft to avoid the main corridors where the attackers were hunting for survivors. The metal was hot against his hands and smoke made his eyes water. He could hear voices below him speaking in the clicking language of the Korthak. When he reached Deck 5, Jake carefully opened a ceiling panel and looked down. The corridor was empty, but scorch marks on the walls showed there had been fighting here too. He dropped down and moved toward the royal quarters. The door had been blasted open. Jake went in low, his rifle ready. The room was a mess of overturned furniture and broken glass. Veltani technology sparked and smoked where it had been damaged by weapons fire. But there was no body, no blood. A soft sound came from behind a fallen bookshelf. Jake moved closer, his finger on the trigger. Don't shoot, a voice said in perfect English. It was musical, like wind chimes, but there was pain in it. Jake pushed the bookshelf aside. Queen Zixthara lay crumpled against the wall, her strange alien beauty marred by a deep cut across her shoulder. She was nothing like Jake had expected. Most Veltani looked like giant insects with multiple arms and compound eyes, but the Queen looked almost human, except for the crystalline formations that grew from her skull like a crown, and the way her skin seemed to glow with soft blue light. You're hurt, Jake said, kneeling beside her. The attackers used poison weapons, she whispered. My people. Are they? I'm sorry. Jake didn't lie to her. I think you're the only one left. The Queen's glow dimmed. For a moment she looked very young and very afraid. Then her back straightened and Jake saw the strength that had made her a ruler of worlds. They want to kill me to prevent the alliance, she said. If I die here, my people will think humans betrayed us. They will destroy your world. Jake felt cold despite the heat from the fires burning throughout the ship. Earth had 3 billion people. Men, women, children, all dead because some aliens wanted to stop a peace treaty. That's not going to happen, he said. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The Korthak were searching room by room. They would be here soon. Jake helped the Queen to her feet. She was taller than him and moved with a strange grace despite her injuries. Her blood was silver and seemed to shine in the dim light. Can you walk? He asked. I will try. Jake led her toward the emergency pod bay. The ship groaned around them as more explosions shook the hull. Emergency announcements echoed through the corridors in 3 languages. But Jake knew there was no one left to hear them. The pod bay was in chaos. Half the pods had already been launched or destroyed. Bodies floated in the zero-gravity section where the artificial gravity had failed. Jake found a pod that still had power and started the launch sequence. "Why are you helping me?" the Queen asked as Jake strapped her into the pod's single-passenger seat. Jake paused. It was a good question. He could have taken this pod for himself. Should have, probably. But when he looked at her, all he saw was someone who needed help. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. The Queen stared at him with eyes that shifted color like opals. "Your people are strange." "Yeah, we get that a lot." Jake sealed the pod and hit the launch button. As it shot away from the dying ship, he caught one last glimpse of Queen Zixithera's face through the small window. She was looking back at him with an expression he couldn't read. Then the Aurora's dawn exploded, taking Jake and everything else into the darkness of space. When Jake woke up, he was lying on something soft and green. Sunlight filtered down through strange purple leaves. His head felt like someone had used it for target practice, and his left arm was bleeding from a dozen small cuts. But he was alive. The pod had landed in what looked like a jungle. Alien birds made sounds like broken music in the trees above. In the distance, Jake could hear running water. And something else. Something that sounded like crying. He found Queen Zixithera 50 feet away, pulling herself out of the wreckage of her own escape pod. Her crystalline crown was cracked, and her glow had faded to almost nothing. When she saw him, she tried to stand but collapsed back to her knees. "I thought you were dead," she said. "Takes more than that to kill a human," Jake said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "Are you okay?" "The poison is spreading," she admitted. "I have perhaps 2 days before it reaches my heart." Jake looked around at the alien jungle. No rescue, no medical supplies. No idea where they were or if anyone was even looking for them. Just a dying alien queen and one stubborn human soldier. "Then we better get to work," he said. The jungle moon was trying to kill them. Jake learned this within the first hour. The beautiful purple plants that looked like flowers would snap at anything that moved, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. The innocent-looking vines hanging from trees would wrap around a person's neck if they walked too close. Even the water from the stream he'd heard earlier was dangerous. When Jake tested it with a piece of metal from the crashed pod, the water ate through it like acid. Queen Zixithera sat in the shade of a large rock, watching Jake work. Her breathing was getting worse, and the silver blood from her shoulder wound had turned dark. The poison was spreading faster than she'd thought. "You should leave me," she said quietly. Jake didn't look up from the shelter he was building using pieces from both crashed pods. "Not happening. I am dying anyway, and you have a better chance of survival alone." "Maybe." Jake fitted 2 metal panels together and used his belt to tie them in place. "But then who's going to tell your people that humans didn't betray you?" The Queen was quiet for a moment. "You truly believe someone will find us?" "Someone will look for us. Whether they find us depends on how long we can stay alive." Jake had been in survival situations before, but never on an alien world. Everything here was wrong. The gravity was a little too heavy. The air smelled like cinnamon and ozone. The sun was too red and cast strange shadows, but the basic rules were the same. Find shelter, find food, find water, stay alive. The shelter came first. Jake used metal panels from the pods to create a small lean-to against the rock. It wouldn't stop a determined predator, but it would keep them dry if it rained. And from the dark clouds gathering on the horizon, rain was coming soon. The food problem was harder. Jake had emergency rations for 3 days, but the Queen couldn't eat human food. Her people needed a different kind of nutrition, something about the way their bodies processed energy. She could drink water, though, if they could find some that wasn't poisonous. "There," the Queen said, pointing to a cluster of blue fruits growing high in a nearby tree. "Those are safe for me. My people cultivated them on many worlds." Jake looked up at the fruits. They were at least 30 feet off the ground, and the tree trunk was smooth as glass. "How exactly am I supposed to get up there?" "Veltani can phase shift through solid matter for short distances. We simply walk through the trunk and—" She stopped, looking embarrassed. "I forgot. Humans cannot do this." "No, we're stuck with boring old climbing." Jake studied the tree. There were no branches low enough to reach, and the trunk offered no handholds. But there was another tree nearby with rough bark and plenty of branches. If he could get high enough in that one, maybe he could jump across. The Queen watched with growing amazement as Jake began to climb. He moved slowly, testing each branch before putting his full weight on it. Alien wood might look like earth trees, but it could break just as easily. Several times he had to backtrack when a branch proved too weak or when he encountered a nest of something with too many legs and glowing eyes. "Your species is remarkable," the Queen said when Jake finally made it level with the blue fruits. Veltani would use technology for this task. Anti-gravity harnesses, perhaps, or remote gathering drones. "We left those on the ship," Jake called back. He judged the distance to the other tree. It was maybe 8 feet, far enough to be dangerous, close enough to be possible. Jake jumped. For a moment he was flying through alien air under a red sun. Then his hand slammed into a branch on the other tree, and he held on tight as it bent under his weight. He pulled himself up and started picking the blue fruits, dropping them down to the Queen below. When he climbed back down, she was eating one of the fruits with obvious relief. Her glow seemed a little brighter already. "Thank you," she said. "I have not tasted food in 2 days." Jake cracked open one of his ration bars. It tasted like cardboard and chemicals, but it would keep him alive. "What's your real name?" he asked. The Queen looked surprised. "I told you. Queen Zixthara of the Veltani Empire. That's a title. What did your friends call you when you were young?" She was quiet for so long that Jake thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "Thera. My hatching siblings called me Thera. I'm Jake, just Jake. Just Jake." She tried the name, her musical voice making it sound exotic. "You are not what I expected from a human soldier." "What did you expect?" "Violence, aggression. Your people have a reputation as warriors." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, we're good at killing things. Sometimes that's what the situation calls for." As if summoned by his words, something howled in the distance. It was an alien sound like metal scraping against stone. Other voices answered from different parts of the jungle. They were being surrounded. Jake grabbed his rifle and moved to the front of their small shelter. "Stay behind me," he told Thara. "What is it?" "Nothing good." The creatures that emerged from the jungle looked like nightmares. They were the size of wolves but walked on 6 legs like giant insects. Their skin was black and seemed to absorb light. Rows of glowing teeth-filled mouths that were too wide for their heads. There were at least 8 of them, maybe more, hiding in the shadows. "Shadow hunters," Thara whispered. "I have heard of these. They are pack predators, very intelligent." The creatures spread out in a careful pattern, cutting off all escape routes. They moved with purpose, like soldiers following a plan. Jake had seen the same tactic used by human special forces. "Can your people phase through them?" Jake asked. "Not when we are injured. The ability requires focus and energy I do not have." Jake checked his rifle. 30 rounds left, against 8 or more enemies that moved like liquid darkness. The lead creature made a sound like breaking glass. The others began to close in. Jake opened fire. His first shot hit the lead hunter center mass. It stumbled but didn't fall. These things were tough. Jake shifted targets, aiming for what he hoped were vital areas. The creatures scattered, using the jungle itself as cover. One of them came at Jake from the left side, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Jake spun and fired, catching it in what might have been a shoulder. Dark blood sprayed, but the creature kept coming. Jake dove to the side just as claws raked the air where his head had been. He rolled and came up firing. This time his shot found something important. The creature dropped and didn't get up, but the others were still coming. Jake backed toward the shelter where Thara waited. His mind raced, calculating angles and ammunition. 8 creatures, maybe 9. 27 rounds left. Even if every shot was perfect, he might not have enough. That was when something impossible happened. Thara stood up beside him. Her glow suddenly blazed bright blue, and she extended her hand toward the attacking creatures. For just a moment, her hand seemed to become translucent, like she was only half there. The effect on the shadow hunters was immediate. They stopped their attack and began to back away, making sounds that might have been whimpers. The bright light seemed to cause them actual pain. "They fear concentrated light energy," Thara explained, swaying on her feet from the effort. "But I cannot maintain this for long." Jake didn't waste the opportunity. He aimed carefully and put 2 rounds into each of the remaining creatures. When Thara's light finally faded, the jungle was quiet again except for the sound of alien birds and his own heavy breathing. "Well," Jake said, reloading his rifle. "That was educational." Thara collapsed back against the rock. The effort had cost her, but she was smiling. Your people adapt quickly. Most species would have panicked. Panicking gets you killed. Jake dragged the body of the closest shadow hunter away from their camp. No point in attracting scavengers. Besides, you helped. That light thing was pretty impressive. We worked together, Thara said softly. Veltani do not usually work well with other species. We prefer to handle problems as a collective. Sometimes you need someone watching your back, Jake said. Even queens. As the alien sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jake kept watch while Thara slept. The poison was still spreading through her body, but she seemed stronger after eating. Maybe they had more than 2 days. Maybe someone really would find them. And maybe, Jake thought as he listened to the sounds of the jungle night, they could actually survive this thing together. The hunter ships arrived on the 3rd day. Jake spotted them first, 3 black shapes moving too smoothly through the sky to be birds. Korthak vessels, sleek and deadly. They circled the crash site like vultures before landing in a clearing about 2 miles away. How many? Thara asked. She was sitting up now, her color better after 2 days of rest and alien fruit, but Jake could see the dark lines of poison creeping up her neck. Jake lowered his makeshift binoculars. I count 12 soldiers, maybe more inside the ships. They've got tracking equipment and heavy weapons. They will find us soon. Yeah. Jake started breaking down their camp, packing everything useful into 2 small packs. But we're not going to make it easy for them. Over the past 3 days, Jake had learned things about the jungle that the Korthak didn't know. Which plants were dangerous and which were harmless. Where the streams were safe to cross and where acid pools waited beneath innocent-looking water. He'd also learned things about Thara that surprised him. She was tougher than she looked. Despite the poison, she could keep up with him when they moved. She was smart too, understanding his plans almost before he finished explaining them, and she was curious about everything, asking questions about human tactics and strategy that made Jake think harder about things he usually did by instinct. Your military training is very different from ours, she said as they worked their way deeper into the jungle, staying off the obvious paths. Veltani fight as a unified group mind. Each individual knows their role and performs it perfectly. But humans improvise, Jake finished. We make it up as we go along. It should not work. Chaos should lead to defeat. Jake smiled grimly. Tell that to the shadow hunters. They moved for 2 hours before Jake found what he was looking for. A narrow canyon with steep walls and only one way in or out. Perfect for an ambush if you were defending. Perfect for a trap if you weren't careful. Jake studied the canyon walls. Loose rocks, unstable-looking formations, plenty of places to hide. And at the far end, a small cave that might lead somewhere useful. We make our stand here, he decided. Thara looked around doubtfully. We will be trapped. Only if we stay trapped. Jake started climbing the canyon wall, testing handholds. Trust me, it took them an hour to set up Jake's plan. He positioned charges made from the power cells of their crashed pods at key points along the canyon walls. When they exploded, they would bring down tons of rock. Not enough to kill their pursuers, but enough to slow them down and split them up. Meanwhile, Thara used her phase-shifting ability to hide supplies and equipment in the solid rock walls, where the Korthak would never think to look. Her power was getting weaker as the poison spread, but she could still manage brief shifts. There, Jake said, checking the last charge. Now we wait. They didn't wait long. The tracking equipment the Korthak used was good, and they moved through the jungle like they owned it. Jake heard them coming long before he saw them. Heavy boots on soft ground, metal weapons clicking against armor, voices speaking in their harsh clicking language. Captain Vexmore led the hunting party personally. Jake had seen pictures of him in intelligence briefings. 9 feet tall, covered in natural armor with 4 arms that could each hold a different weapon. His species had evolved from predators, and it showed. Spread out, Vexmore ordered in English. Apparently he wanted his prey to understand him. The human and the traitor queen are close. I can smell their fear. Jake waited until half the hunting party was inside the canyon. Then he triggered the first charges. The explosion echoed off the canyon walls like thunder. Rocks fell like rain and dust filled the air. 3 of the Korthak soldiers were buried under the rockfall. The others scattered, some trapped inside the canyon. Others caught outside just like Jake had planned. Now, he whispered to Thara. They moved out of their hiding place and began working their way along the canyon wall. Jake had found a narrow ledge that led to the cave at the far end. It was barely wide enough for one person, and a fall would mean death on the rocks below. But it was their only way out. Behind them, the Korthak were regrouping. Jake could hear Vexmore roaring orders, trying to organize his scattered forces. But the canyon was full of dust and falling rocks, and visibility was almost zero. Jake helped Thera along the ledge, supporting her when the poison made her stumble. Her breathing was getting worse, and her skin felt cold despite the warm air. They were running out of time. "Tell me about Earth," she said as they climbed. "What is it like?" Jake thought about it. "How do you describe a whole world to someone who's never seen it?" "Lots of blue," he said finally. "Water and sky. Green plants. People everywhere, all different colors and shapes. Music and art and food from 1,000 different cultures. It sounds beautiful." "Yeah, it is." Jake paused at a difficult section of the ledge. "What about your homeworld?" "Crystal cities that sing in the wind. Gardens that stretch to the horizon. My people move through the air like schools of fish thinking and dreaming together." Her voice was sad. "It was beautiful too before the war." Jake helped her over a gap in the ledge. "What war?" "The war that made me queen. My parents died fighting the Vorthak rebellion. I was too young to rule, but someone had to hold the empire together. So I learned to be strong, to make hard decisions, to think only of my people's survival." She was quiet for a moment. "I never learned to be just Thera." They reached the cave entrance just as plasma bolts started hitting the rocks around them. The Korthak had found their trail. The cave was deeper than Jake had hoped. It stretched back into the mountain, lit by glowing fungi that covered the walls. Strange formations of crystal and metal suggested this wasn't entirely natural. Someone had lived here once. "Veltani ruins." Thara breathed, her glow brightening with excitement. "My people were here long ago." Jake wasn't interested in archaeology. He could hear the Korthak climbing up toward the cave entrance. "Is there another way out?" Thara moved deeper into the cave, her light revealing carved symbols on the walls. "Perhaps. These markings speak of a great hall, a place where the ancients gathered to sing the deep songs." They found the hall at the heart of the mountain. It was huge, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. In the center stood something that made Jake's breath catch. It was a communication array, ancient but still humming with power. "By the first light," Thara whispered, "it still functions." Heavy footsteps echoed from the cave entrance. The Korthak had found them. "Can you use it?" Jake asked, checking his rifle. 8 rounds left, I can try." Thara moved to the console, her hands dancing over controls that looked like nothing Jake had ever seen. "But it will take time to establish a connection across interstellar space." "How much time?" 10 minutes. Perhaps 15. Jake looked back toward the cave entrance. Captain Vexmore's voice echoed off the stone walls, getting closer. "I'll buy you the time." "Jake, wait." But Jake was already moving, heading back toward the entrance to make his stand. Behind him, alien technology began to sing as Thara worked to contact her people. The song was beautiful and sad, like the voice of the mountain itself. Jake took position at a narrow point in the tunnel where the Korthak would have to come at him one at a time. He had 8 rounds, maybe a few minutes before they overwhelmed him. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. The first Korthak soldier appeared around the bend, plasma rifle raised. Jake put 2 rounds center mass and dropped him. The others came faster now, trying to rush his position. Jake made every shot count. The narrow tunnel worked in his favor, turning the Korthak advantage in numbers into a disadvantage. They couldn't bring their superior firepower to bear without hitting their own people, but there were too many of them. Jake's rifle clicked empty just as Captain Vexmore himself appeared, towering over his fallen soldiers. The Korthak captain held a weapon that looked like it could punch holes in starship hulls. "Foolish human," Vexmore snarled. "You cannot stand against the power of the Korthak syndicate." Jake drew his sidearm. 6 rounds left. Against an enemy that had taken multiple rifle shots without flinching, it wouldn't be enough. "Maybe not," Jake said, "but I can try." Behind them both, the ancient communication array reached full power. Thara's voice filled the cavern, speaking in the liquid music of her people. She was sending a message across the galaxy, telling her people the truth about the betrayal, about the conspiracy, about the human soldier who had kept her alive when everyone else had abandoned her. Vexmore raised his weapon. Jake raised his pistol. The mountain began to sing. The mountain sang with the voices of the dead. As Thara's message poured through the ancient communication array, something unexpected happened. The ruins around them began to glow and ghostly images appeared in the air. Jake saw them through the corner of his eye as he faced Captain Vexmore, Veltani from thousands of years ago, walking through their crystal halls, working together to build something beautiful. But Jake didn't have time to wonder about ancient aliens. Vexmore's weapon was charging, energy building in its barrel with a sound like growing thunder. Jake fired first. His shots hit Vexmore in the chest and shoulder, spinning the giant alien around. Dark blood sprayed the cave walls, but Vexmore didn't fall. Instead, he turned back toward Jake with a snarl of rage, raising his weapon again. Jake dove to the side just as a bolt of superheated plasma turned the rock where he'd been standing into glass. He rolled and came up behind a fallen stone column, checking his pistol. 2 rounds left. You delay the inevitable, human, Vexmore called out. Even if the Queen sends her message, it changes nothing. My people have prepared for this day for decades. Your Earth will burn and her empire will fall. Behind them, Thara's voice grew stronger as she connected with more and more Veltani communication relays. Jake could hear the pain in her musical words, but also determination. She was dying and she knew it. The poison had spread to her hearts, yes, hearts plural. Jake had learned, and her time was measured in minutes now. Not hours, but she kept singing, kept sending her message across the galaxy, because it was the only way to save both their peoples. Tell me something, Jake called out to Vexmore as he moved to a better position. Why do you care so much about keeping humans and Veltani apart? What's it to you? Vexmore's laugh was like metal scraping against stone. Foolish creature. Do you think this is about territory? About resources? This is about survival. When weak species unite, they become strong. When strong species stand alone, they become weak. The Korthik Syndicate has manipulated the politics of this galaxy for centuries, keeping all other races divided while we grew in power. Jake processed this as he checked the cave for other options. A conspiracy spanning centuries. Wars started and stopped by alien puppet masters. How many conflicts throughout galactic history had been orchestrated by the Korthik? But humans, Vexmore continued, humans are different. You do not follow the patterns. You do not behave as our models predict. And now you seek alliance with the Veltani, the one race that could match our technology if properly motivated. So you decided to kill everyone, Jake said. We decided to eliminate the threat before it could grow. Another plasma bolt superheated the air near Jake's head. He was running out of places to hide and Vexmore was getting closer. Time for desperate measures. Jake pulled the power cell from his rifle. It was damaged but still held a charge. If he could short-circuit it just right, he tossed the power cell toward Vexmore and shot it with his second-to-last bullet. The explosion wasn't much, but it was bright and loud in the enclosed space. Vexmore stumbled, temporarily blinded. Jake used the distraction to close the distance, tackling the alien captain around the waist. Vexmore was bigger and stronger, but Jake had spent years learning to fight dirty. He went for the captain's weapon first, twisting one of the alien's forearms until something cracked. The plasma rifle clattered away across the stone floor. Then Vexmore got 2 hands around Jake's throat and started to squeeze. Jake felt his windpipe closing. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. He had maybe 30 seconds before he passed out. He drew his knife with his free hand and drove it into what he hoped was a vital spot on Vexmore's armored torso. The blade skittered off the alien's natural armor plating. Without doing any real damage, Jake tried again, aiming for the joints where armor plates met. This time he felt the knife bite deep. Vexmore roared in pain but didn't let go. If anything, his grip tightened. 20 seconds, Jake's vision was starting to tunnel. He could hear Thara's voice getting weaker as the poison finally began to overwhelm her system. Her message was almost complete, but she was running out of time just like he was. 15 seconds. Jake had 1 chance left. Instead of trying to break Vexmore's grip, he used his last strength to reach for the alien captain's side weapon, a small plasma pistol that Korthik officers carried as backup. 10 seconds. Jake's fingers closed around the weapon. He thumbed off the safety and pressed it against Vexmore's head. 5 seconds. Jake pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt at close range was devastating. Vexmore's grip loosened immediately, and the alien captain toppled backward, forearms sprawling across the ancient stone. Jake collapsed, gasping and rubbing his throat. He was alive, barely, but when he looked toward the communication array, his heart sank. Thara had fallen. She lay crumpled beside the ancient controls, her crystalline crown dark, her skin pale as moonlight. The poison had finally won. Jake crawled over to her, his rifle forgotten. Thara, hey, stay with me. Her opal eyes opened, but they were dim. Did the message? Yeah, Jake said, though he wasn't sure. The communication array was still humming, still sending signals into space, but he had no idea if anyone was listening. Your people got it. They know the truth. Thara smiled, and for a moment her glow returned, faint but beautiful. Thank you, Jake, for everything. Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. Someone will come looking for us. Your people or mine or hell, maybe both. Promise me something, Thara whispered. Anything. When they find us, tell them what you learned here. Tell them that humans and Veltani can work together, that we can be friends. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. And tell them, Thara continued, her voice getting weaker, that just Jake from Detroit kept an alien queen safe when no one else would, that he fought impossible odds because it was the right thing to do, that he showed me what human courage really means. Thara, but she was already fading, her glow dimming like a dying star. My real name, she whispered. My hatching name that only family knew. It was Thara Lindsay. It means light and darkness in the old tongue. Her eyes closed. Her breathing stopped. The last light faded from her crystalline crown. Jake sat beside her in the ancient ruins, listening to the alien technology sing its lonely song. He had failed. The Queen was dead. The alliance was broken. And two civilizations were about to go to war based on lies and manipulation. That was when he heard the ships. Not Korthak ships this time. These were different, their engines singing in harmonious tones that matched the ruins around him. Veltani vessels responding to Thara's message. And behind them the rougher growl of human military engines. Both fleets had come. Both fleets had heard the truth. Jake looked down at Thara's peaceful face and gently closed her eyes. Light and darkness, he said softly. Yeah, that sounds about right. The rescue teams found them an hour later. Veltani soldiers moving like liquid light through the ancient halls, human marines advancing with careful precision. They should have been enemies, but they worked together to search the ruins, sharing information and coordinating their efforts. When they found Jake sitting beside Thara's body, the Veltani soldiers stopped and bowed their heads in respect. The human marines stood at attention. For a moment, alien and human grief joined together in the singing darkness of the mountain. Fleet Commander Zix Talon, Thara's cousin and heir, knelt beside her body. She sent us the full truth, he said in accented English. The Korthak conspiracy, the betrayal, your sacrifice to keep her safe. All of it. I'm sorry, Jake said. I couldn't save her. Human soldier, the commander said formally. You gave her the greatest gift possible. Time. Time to expose the lies. Time to save both our peoples, time to show us that alliance is possible. He paused, studying Jake with eyes like shifting opals. My cousin's message was very clear about your character and your actions. You will be honored by both our peoples. Jake looked around at the mixed group of aliens and humans working together in the ancient ruins. What happens now? Now, said Colonel Barnes, the senior human officer, we go home and start building something new. The Korthak Syndicate has a lot to answer for, and we have a lot of work to do. Fleet Commander Zix Talon nodded. The Queen's final wish was for true alliance between our peoples. We will honor that wish. As they prepared to leave the ruins, Jake took one last look around. The ancient communication array had finally gone silent, its message delivered. In the distance, he could see the wreckage of Korthak ships, destroyed by the combined human Veltani fleet. Thara was gone, but her sacrifice had meant something. Her death had given birth to something new, something that might change the galaxy forever. Light and darkness, Jake thought as they carried her body toward the ships. Sometimes that's all it takes. 6 months later, Colonel Jake Martinez stood in the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council, watching history being made. The promotion still felt strange. 6 months ago, he'd been a sergeant who followed orders and tried not to get killed. Now he wore eagles on his shoulders and had diplomats from 40 different species hanging on his every word. The transformation had been as surprising to Jake as it had been to everyone else. The human colonel will now address the assembly, announced Speaker Vorth, a crystalline being whose voice sounded like wind chimes, as the primary witness to the Korthak conspiracy and architect of the human Veltani alliance. Jake stepped forward to the speaking platform. The hall was massive, with representatives from dozens of worlds arranged in ascending rings around the central floor. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Jake couldn't even tell which end was the head. But all of them were listening. 6 months ago, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. I was just a soldier trying to do his job. I had no idea that keeping one alien queen alive would change the entire galaxy. In the Veltani section, Fleet Commander Zixtalan, now Emperor Zixtalan after the restructuring of their government, nodded approvingly. The Veltani had abandoned their old collective mind system in favor of something that blended their natural cooperation with human-style individual initiative. The results had been remarkable. Queen Thera died believing that our two peoples could work together, Jake continued, not just as allies of convenience but as true partners. The past 6 months have proven her right. The evidence was all around them. Human military advisors now served with Veltani fleets, bringing tactical flexibility and creative problem-solving to complement Veltani technology and coordination. Veltani scientists worked in human laboratories, their advanced knowledge accelerating research that would have taken centuries to complete alone. Trade flowed freely between the two civilizations, bringing prosperity to both. But the real changes went deeper than economics or military cooperation. Jake had seen them firsthand during his new role as head of interspecies relations. Humans were learning to think beyond individual needs, to consider the welfare of the group. Veltani were discovering the power of personal initiative, the strength that came from individual courage and creativity. The Korthak Syndicate spent centuries keeping us divided, Jake said, his voice hardening. They started wars, manipulated governments, assassinated leaders, all to prevent exactly what we've achieved. They understood something that we're only now beginning to realize. When different species combine their strengths instead of fighting over their differences, they become something greater than the sum of their parts. In the security section, Jake could see several Korthak prisoners in custody. The conspiracy trials were still ongoing, revealing layers of manipulation going back hundreds of years. 3 galactic wars had been started by Korthak agents. Dozens of promising alliances had been sabotaged. Entire species had been driven to extinction to prevent them from becoming threats to Korthak dominance. But the conspiracy was broken now. The combined human-Veltani fleet had dismantled Korthak bases throughout the galaxy. Their puppet governments had fallen. Their agents had been exposed. For the first time in centuries, the smaller species of the galaxy could chart their own courses without fear of invisible manipulation. Today, Jake continued, we're not just announcing the formal ratification of the Human-Veltani Alliance. We're opening that alliance to any species that shares our commitment to mutual cooperation and peaceful development. We're offering a different path forward, one based on trust instead of fear, on collaboration instead of domination. The response was immediate. Representatives began standing, first a few, then dozens, then nearly the entire assembly. Species that had been enemies for generations were applauding together. The sound was like nothing Jake had ever heard, a chorus of voices from across the galaxy, united in hope for the first time in living memory. After the formal session, Jake found himself on a balcony overlooking the capital city of Neutral Station. The space habitat was a marvel of engineering, home to representatives from hundreds of worlds. In the distance, he could see ships from 12 different civilizations docked at the trading ports. Quite a change from a jungle moon, said a familiar musical voice. Jake turned to see Emperor Zixtalan approaching. The Veltani leader looked much like his cousin had, with the same crystalline features and shifting opal eyes. But where Thera had carried the weight of empire alone, Zixtalan seemed more relaxed, more confident. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real, Jake admitted. 6 months ago I was worried about staying alive for another day. Now I'm helping to redesign galactic politics. My cousin would be proud, Zixtalan said. Her message from the ruins has become something of a legend among my people. The story of the human soldier who kept fighting when there was no hope, who protected someone he barely knew simply because it was right. Jake was quiet for a moment, remembering. She was braver than me, you know. At the end, when the poison was killing her, she kept working to send that message. She never gave up, not even when she knew she was dying. Veltani do not typically believe in individual heroism, Zixtalan said. We think in terms of collective achievement, group success. But Thara's story and yours has taught us something new. Sometimes one person making the right choice can change everything. And sometimes working together makes you stronger than you ever imagined, Jake replied. Your people taught us that. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the traffic flow around the space station. Ships from Earth and the Veltani homeworld worked side by side with vessels from the Altarian Republic, the Centauri Federation, and dozens of other species that had joined the new alliance. Have you heard the latest reports from the border sectors? Zix Talon asked eventually. Jake nodded. The news had been remarkable. Pirates and raiders that had plagued the outer systems for decades were surrendering or fleeing as joint human Veltani patrol fleets brought law and order to previously lawless regions. Trade routes that had been too dangerous to use were opening up. Colonies that had lived in fear were now thriving. 15 new species have requested alliance membership this month alone, Jake said. Admiral Chen thinks we'll have 50 member races by the end of the year. A galaxy united by choice rather than conquest, Zix Talon mused. It is a beautiful dream. I hope we can make it reality. We will, Jake said with certainty. Thara showed us it was possible. Now we just have to do the work. A chime from Jake's communicator interrupted their conversation. Colonel Martina, came the voice of his aide, Lieutenant Sarah Kim. The Andromedan delegation has arrived early. They're requesting an immediate meeting to discuss joining the alliance. Jake sighed. The Andromedans were from outside the galaxy entirely, refugees from some disaster in their home system. If they were seeking alliance, it meant the reputation of the human-Veltani partnership was spreading even beyond the Milky Way. Duty calls, he said to Zix Talon. Indeed. But Jake... The Emperor paused, using his friend's first name as he rarely did in public. Before you go, I wanted you to know. We've decided to name our new capital city after my cousin. Tharalinse City, Light and Darkness City. It seems appropriate, Jake smiled. She would have liked that. But she would have been more interested in what the city represents. A place where different species can come together and build something better than any of them could create alone. Yes, Zix Talon agreed. Exactly that. As Jake headed back inside to meet with the Andromedan delegation, he passed a memorial wall that had been installed in the station's main corridor. It listed the names of all those who had died in the struggle against the Korthak conspiracy. Near the top, inscribed in both human letters and Veltani crystal script, was a name that Jake paused to read every time he passed by. Queen Tharalinse of the Veltani Empire. Light and Darkness, Keeper of Hope. Below her name was a simple inscription. She believed that different species could become friends. Her faith changed the galaxy. Jake touched the crystal letters gently, then continued on his way. There were Andromedans to meet, trade agreements to negotiate, patrol routes to plan, and a dozen other tasks that came with building a peaceful galaxy. But sometimes, in quiet moments like these, Jake remembered a dying alien queen in ancient ruins, sending her message of hope across the stars. Her voice had been beautiful like music made of light itself, and her final words echoed in his mind whenever the work seemed too hard or the dream too impossible. Tell them that humans and Veltani can work together, that we can be friends. Jake smiled and quickened his pace. There was work to do, and he was just the human to do it. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and dangers and possibilities beyond imagining. But for the first time in centuries, its future looked bright. Light and darkness, indeed.